So without further ado, I'll pass you over to our panelists. And really the main question as ever is, why is it so important to read? Alfredo, what's your opinions on this from the perspective of Peru?
Y muchas gracias, Helen. Con esta pregunta estaba recordando el cuento de un niño que no quería leer. Sus padres y sus maestros le insistían que debía hacerlo, pero nadie lo convencía. El niño fue a preguntar a su abuelo: abuelo, ¿por qué es importante que lea? El anciano se sorprendió tanto por la pregunta como por la presencia de su nieto. Hacía mucho tiempo que nadie le prestaba atención y se pasaba los días solo y mirando en silencio. Entonces se levantó, sacó un espejo del cajón de una mesa, tomó al niño de la mano y le dijo: ven conmigo. Y salieron juntos al campo. En un momento voy a relatar el resto del cuento, pero mientras tanto puedo decirles que nosotros, en las bibliotecas rurales de Cajamarca, sostenemos que en general la lectura es una práctica fundamental para la formación de los seres humanos. Que lo que leemos y la forma en que lo leemos afecta la construcción de nuestras vidas y de nuestras sociedades. Como la lectura se vincula directamente con el cerebro, con el espíritu y con la cultura, al leer los seres humanos podemos comprender mejor el mundo y distinguir nuestro futuro. Para el caso de nosotros, quiero precisar la pregunta: ¿por qué es importante que un niño campesino lea? En nuestra cultura de los Andes siempre hemos leído el maravilloso libro de la tierra. Desde muy pequeños nuestros padres nos enseñan a leer el color y el valor de las plantas, el vuelo de los pájaros, la textura de las semillas y la forma de las nubes. Es genial poder leernos a nosotros mismos. Si se lee la naturaleza para saber de sus encantos y de sus bendiciones, en los libros podemos hallar también otras naturalezas y otros encantos. Las bendiciones entonces pueden multiplicarse y enriquecer nuestro camino y nuestras propias vidas. Entonces, es importante que los niños lean los libros sin perder su capacidad de leer el mundo. Y es verdad que los libros pueden ser las llaves para abrir las puertas de la imaginación y de los viajes sin tregua por universos distintos. De hecho, pueden incluso abrir las puertas para leerse a sí mismos. Pero también es cierto que muchas puertas extraordinarias están clausuradas, que muchos libros están cargados de racismo y de discriminación, y que la educación formal no utiliza las lecturas precisamente para liberar la mente humana. Cajamarca es una de las regiones más abrumadoramente pobres del país, aunque somos increíblemente ricos en cultura, en naturaleza, en creatividad y belleza. Pero la pobreza no es solo de pan, sino también de oportunidades. El interés puede existir, pero no existen las respuestas. Y cuando las hay, no resultan pertinentes ni en forma ni en contenidos. Eso podría, de momento, contestar.
Thank you, Alfredo. Frank, very different picture here, or is it? Why do you think children need to read here?
Well, I was going to tell you a story about why I chose to be a children's writer, because I'd always been a writer. I'd been a screenwriter, I'd been a comedy writer, and I was working on a project that became a film in Bosnia after the war after Yugoslavian war. And in the war in Yugoslavia, I'd come across ethnic cleansing, when children had been taken away from orphanages or from homes even, and separated into their ethnic groups. And I always wondered what happened to those children. It was like an awful thing to watch, because they were being defined purely by their race. And I followed that up a few years later. I did a project that never came to fruition, but it was about Roma gypsy children in Switzerland who were taken away from their parents on the smallest pretext and put in homes, in government homes, on the grounds that this would give them a better chance to be good Swiss citizens, because Roma gypsies were chaotic and mad and they weren't really part of respectable society. So I met a child who'd been in one of those homes, and she was a grown-up now. She worked for the United Nations as a kind of ambassador for refugees. I have a picture of her somewhere. I should have got it for you. Her name was Mariella, and she was very fierce. She's quite a distinguished writer in Switzerland. She's a great advocate. And I had lots of conversations with her about this phenomenon. But at the end of one of those conversations, I said to her, well, how did you know? Because she'd been brought up in these homes. She'd been moved to, I think, 10 different homes. She'd done a spell in prison. She'd narrowly missed a lobotomy. She'd had her own child taken away. She'd been brought up in this completely loveless setup where she had been totally defined by her ethnicity. That was all that mattered. And I said to her, how did you know that there was more? How did you know that you were worth more? How did you know it wasn't right? Because she was very rebellious. That's why she'd been moved around a lot. Like, what made you rebel? What made you know that this wasn't right? This wasn't enough? You've been so enclosed. Where did you get that information from? And she said, I read Heidi. And I still can't tell you that story without tearing up. I just find it amazing that a children's book could have turned someone inside out like that. And I know why she was given Heidi. She was given Heidi because it is the great Swiss classic. She was given it as a piece of this is our official culture, which we want you to approve of and appreciate. And that book did not do that to her. The book exploded her out of the life that she was meant to be in. It blew down all the walls around her. And I really believe that reading for pleasure does that, gives you that opportunity to blow down the walls that divide us. And I meet children now in schools in England who are every bit as imprisoned as her, but in ideas about masculinity, about class, about religion, about the things that divide us. And I think books are the only way out. Reading is the only way out. And listening to Alfredo talk, my heart was kind of breaking because he talks so easily and fluently about beauty and creativity. And children in England are hugely privileged by comparison in material terms. And they have, I think, very little understanding of what beauty surrounds them and what creativity they have, because we've kind of crushed that out of them and distracted it out of them. So we have the opposite problem to Alfredo. I think we don't cherish those things. And I think books are the way to do it. And I'll show you this though, because he was talking about reading the Book of Nature. These are the first. I grew up in a flat in the middle of Liverpool, a very crowded little flat in the middle of Liverpool. These are the first books I ever owned. They're ridiculous. They're called I Spy books. And you had to kind of go and spot things and write them down. They made you look. They made you look. That's what these books did. They made you look. They made you go, look at this. This is beautiful. Remember this. And this is a long time ago. I've still got mine. And I think that is the greatest gift that it can do, is to make you look at what's around you and treasure what's around you. And that's, we're living in a moment in Britain where children are incredibly fragile mentally and emotionally. And books build resilience. So that's why I do this.
I wonder if we could talk about what access you have to books if you're a child in the countryside in Cajamarca.
Sí, gracias, Helen, Frank. Sí, me perdí una parte, lastimosamente, pero espero poder escuchar después a Frank en la grabación que debe quedar de este webinar. Pues en Cajamarca nosotros hemos vuelto a contar las historias que los poderosos nos obligaron a ignorar y a olvidar. Los cuentos y las historias propias del campo están llenas de gracia y de humor, pero también de dignidad, de esperanza y de la ética suficiente para respetar la tierra que nos ama y nos sustenta. Desde hace ya varios años rescatamos la sabiduría de nuestros abuelos y la ponemos en los libros que a su vez regresan a las comunidades. Con estos y otros libros caminamos en los pueblos. En cada lugar tratamos de tener bibliotecas y círculos de lectura y animamos también a que los maestros tengan una biblioteca rural en las escuelas y colegios. Lo que pasa es que, salvo las nuestras, en nuestros pueblos no hay bibliotecas. O si las hay, no funcionan. Y peor todavía en el campo. En Cajamarca hay casi 10.000 instituciones educativas, pero no hay bibliotecas a las que puedan acudir los estudiantes. Y cada vez quedan menos librerías donde puedan comprarse buenos libros. Todo este penoso vacío está llenándose cada vez más con la superficial y enajenante presencia de los celulares. Hace casi 50 años, cuando empezamos con las bibliotecas rurales, nosotros creíamos, por ejemplo, que a los campesinos había que darles libros de agricultura tecnificada para que mejoraran sus cultivos. Hasta que los propios campesinos nos hicieron ver que somos herederos de la agricultura más extraordinaria del mundo, florecida desde hace más de 10.000 años. Pensábamos que para el campo eran útiles los libros prácticos y domésticos, hasta que empezaron a pedirnos libros acerca de la estructura de los módulos lunares, de la geografía de Haití o de Canadá, la biografía de Beethoven, la historia medieval de Europa o la teoría de la relatividad. Y eso es porque somos cosmopolitas. Nos interesa el conocimiento de todo el mundo y no discriminamos otros saberes. Y los conocimientos de todo el mundo también son nuestros. Y comprendimos que no basta con tener libros. Las lecturas tienen que ser apropiadas a nuestra vida y a nuestras búsquedas, a la recreación constante de la inventiva auténtica, a la afirmación de la justicia y de la equidad, de la soberanía y de la alegría. Que la lectura además no solo es una oportunidad personal, sino un derecho colectivo, tanto para los más grandes como para los más pequeños, porque somos comunidad. Por eso, cuando nos organizamos y leemos en grupos, participan incluso aquellos que son analfabetos. Escuchando, aprendemos, y conversando, compartimos lo que sabemos.
Thank you, Alfredo. Frank, I know that you're interested in reading circles as well. Would you like to just talk a little bit about how what access people have to books in the UK?
I mean, we have almost the opposite problem to Alfredo in that people have stopped, government has stopped valuing books, and we're looking at a situation where libraries are closing, where schools are willingly getting rid of their own libraries to replace them with learning resource centres, which look like they look like phone banks. They look like they look like call centres, and I think one of the pressures. I think there are two pressures. One is the one that Alfredo talked about, which is the mobile phone thing, which is the tyranny of distraction, and I don't think we should underestimate what a kind of crisis that is. this, I would call it the tyranny of distraction. The idea that children are never bored, children never get any quiet time, and therefore it's perceived that they have no space to read. And I don't think that's completely necessarily true, but I think as a society we really undervalue the time that children spend reading, and in particular we undervalue reading aloud. I think reading aloud has a unique power for pleasure, to bring people together, to give them a shared experience. And it's primal, you know, it goes back to storytelling round the fire. And increasingly that's squeezed out of the curriculum at school. And it's also very, very undervalued. It's a strange thing for a writer to say, but I think we spend far too much time in school writing. It's a secretarial skill, really. It's not a really important skill. Listening and speaking are huge skills that we are in danger of losing because nobody looks anybody in the eye anymore. So I think that idea of like sitting down and reading to children is really, really a huge thing for me. And again, I'll tell a story. I'm involved with an organization in Liverpool called The Reader, which does live reading. You read books together. And one of the things that I love about it is that there's nothing transactional about this. You don't have to tell us what you think of the story. You don't have to write a letter in the style of one of the characters. You don't have to pick out the wow words. You don't have to show that you don't have to demonstrate that you've learned anything. You just listen, right? And enjoy it and share it. And one of those reading groups was in prison, in Walton Prison. And there's a guy in there who was in for violent crime. And without going into too much detail, he had really loved the reading group in The Reader, that The Reader had done. And when he filled in a little questionnaire about why, he said, being read to was one of the very few times in my life when I'd felt alert without feeling threatened. And by alert, I think he means fully present, fully yourself and fully engaged. And I think we talk about reading a lot as a solitary activity. And children are exposed more and more to isolating activities. No matter how social media is, ultimately, it's an isolating thing. Whereas being read to is a profound form of connection between you and the reader. And my evidence of that is that my first reading experiences with Jackanory, which was a TV program, I can still remember the voices, right? The actual voices. Why do I remember? Not just the stories, but the voices of the people. Why do human beings recognize other human beings' voices just as well as they do faces? There is something really profound, like a fingerprint, about our individual voices. And reading aloud cuts through all the other distractions, I think, and gives us a chance to make connections with each other that increasingly we're not allowed to make. And it also commands attention. I'm going to read you this from the Twittering machine about, maybe I'll find it and read it later. I thought here it is. This page really struck me. The capacity to pay attention is subject to scarcity. Neuroscientists tell us that physically the brain cannot focus on more than one attention-rich input at a time. The state of distraction, as one is constantly notified about messages, emails, updates, software alerts, app alerts, news alerts. This is not a state of magnificently keeping several balls in the air. This is a state of continuous time and emotion-consuming shifts from one focus to another. It will take over half an hour to recover full attention once distracted. The state of distraction that we idealize as multitasking is a form of squandering. To pay attention is to diminish the attention that one has available. To pay attention in this distracted fashion is to waste that human capacity. And I think reading is the cure for that. Okay.
Thank you. Alfredo, we're going to think about other things that, challenges that you have with accessing books? You've touched on a couple of things, but what challenges, the main challenges in Peru?
No, lo que acaba de decir Frank me hace pensar que el tema de la lectura, los problemas que le anteceden, la falta de libertad que tiene esta práctica extraordinaria, los problemas terminan siendo a escala planetaria. Yo pensaba que había problemas muy, muy propios de aquí, pero ya veo que se refinan en el contexto más inglés o europeo. En el caso nuestro, ¿cuáles serían las barreras para que los niños lean? Aparte de la falta de los libros, en realidad no hay nada que impida que los niños lean. Es decir, que ejerciten su capacidad de leer, pero sí que hay muchas y rígidas barreras. Una de ellas, diría, en el caso de Perú, son los padres, aquellos que ya no cuentan cuentos a sus hijos y los mandan a dormir con el celular, o que exigen una educación para que desde muy pequeños ya sepan mecánicamente leer y escribir. Otra barrera es la falta de estímulo y de ejemplo. Pretender que los niños lean sin tener ejemplos vivos y felices de lectura es como querer que un jardín florezca sin agua, sin sol y sin abono. Hay ejemplo, pero al revés. Es decir, con el desinterés de los adultos por la lectura. Y es una barrera el que los niños no puedan ejercer la fortuna de jugar sin artefactos o de cultivar sus valores y su tierra y de poder leer acerca de todo lo que están viviendo. Lo que no se ha entendido hasta hoy aquí es que la lectura no es un anexo de la arquitectura educativa y que la escritura no es un complemento del ejercicio pedagógico. La lectura y la escritura deberían ser esenciales y transversales en toda la educación. La lectura y la escritura son el motor y los carriles por donde se desplaza el tren de nuestros aprendizajes. Eso, si queremos verlas como un viaje. Y son el rumbo y la estación de nuestras voces y nuestra memoria, si queremos verlas como nuestros caminos. Pero en la escuela se enseña matemáticas para rendir bien las cuentas, pero no palabras para liberar bien los cuentos. Se enseña gramática, pero no se enseñan expresiones. Y no hay cursos acerca de libros, ni de lecturas, ni de escrituras. Es como el mundo al revés. Como si un médico tuviera que aprender mucho de enfermedades, pero nada de remedios. Por eso, estamos convencidos que no se trata solo de crear hábitos de lectura, porque un hábito puede ser una rutina o solo un procedimiento, como tener el hábito de cepillarse los dientes, pero hacerlo únicamente por el miedo de ir donde el dentista y no porque se quiere tener una bella sonrisa. Lo que tenemos que cultivar es el gusto, muy gustoso por la lectura, el extraordinario placer de leer y la sensibilidad de compartir y poner en práctica lo que aprendemos. Porque, a ver, la palabra escuela viene del latín ludus, que es el lugar para jugar. Y colegio viene del griego skoli, que significa tiempo libre. Y era antiguamente el lugar para el cultivo del espíritu. La educación, entonces, no tendría que ser otra gran barrera para la siembra de la lectura. Porque en la escuela, hoy por hoy, la lectura es una obligación, con libros llenos de adulteces que atentan contra la imaginación de los niños, o con contenidos extraños, de mundos que no conocemos y que no nos hablan, ni hablan como nosotros. libros que pueden abrir el mundo de afuera, pero ni siquiera nos tocan la puerta de adentro.
And Alfredo, can you just say a bit about the content of the books that you publish that the children like to read as an illustration?
Sí, hace 40 años, más o menos, un poco más, nosotros empezamos con el rescate de la tradición oral, la recuperación de la memoria colectiva, de la palabra, de la sabiduría de nuestros viejos, de nuestros pueblos, de nuestras comunidades. Y con esos cuentos, con esas tradiciones, con esos testimonios, construimos los libros con las mismas palabras, con las mismas expresiones, con los mismos sentidos y con los nombres de las personas que han contado, los comuneros, las comuneras, los campesinos, y esos libros regresan al campo. Se llama la colección en general Biblioteca Campesina y forman parte de un gran proyecto que sigue vivo gracias al apoyo de la Fundación de Sara para Bibliotecas Rurales, que es la Enciclopedia Campesina de Cajamarca. Entonces, seguimos con este proceso de conocernos a nosotros mismos y convertir esta palabra en libros, no para congelarla, sino para impulsar, para tener este instrumento, esta herramienta de libro e impulsar estos recuerdos y estas tradiciones nuestras.
Thank you. Frank, I think we've talked about some of quite a lot of the challenges, but perhaps we can move on into how you inspire readers, because you do. You just had to hear Sam there with his comments about your books.
I just think, to pick up on something that Alfredo was talking about, I think we underestimate the importance of pleasure. I think we talk about pleasure in the same bracket as distraction or fun or whatever. And I think pleasure is actually a really profound form of attention. Pleasure is something that if you really take pleasure in something, it will stay with you and it will nourish you and it will come out at some point later in your life. And I think I see this all the time. And I think it's very difficult for teachers because teachers are living in a world of inputs and measurable outcomes. And actually the real outcomes don't come for years and years and years later. And they're not often from the things that you're explicitly teaching. You know, they're from those shared moments of which, you know, for me, being read to was the most profound. And so I think pleasure is something that really holds something in your mind. And I worry that in schools, we have this thing where everything becomes transactional. I will read you a story, but you will have to interpret it. I will read you a story, but you will have to write something in the style of it. We have to have something to show, right? And I think the truth is that when we really take pleasure in something, you will have something to show for it, but it may be in 50 years' time, you know. I helped design the opening ceremony for the 2012 Olympic Games. And I always think that like everything that we did to create this huge digital moment, like 1 billion people watched it. It was tweeted, it was live streamed, it was, you know, it was everywhere. It involved miles and miles of technology and money. But creating it, we did this thing where we made little scrapbooks, which we cut out and made with glue, and we stuck things on the wall. And I walked into the room that we were creating it in one day, and I just thought, this is my year 6 classroom. This looks exactly like Sister Paul's class, St. Bartholomew School, the last year that I was there. And those skills and that attention that we were given in that class, and the core of that class was being read to. You know, that was the big treat, and that was what we really shared, and that's what we took away. So I just keep coming back to being read to, being read to, being read to. And as a children's writer, I have the huge privilege of going around schools and reading to children. And it is a transformative thing to be read to. It's primal. And you know, I think it is the kind of cure for all of these things. There needs to be space to read to. And I completely agree with what Alfredo said about parents and children. If teachers don't read, kids won't read. If parents don't read, kids won't read. And I think we are always in danger of, because literacy is an important skill, the teaching of the skill can squeeze out the reason for the skill. You know, when my father wanted me to play football, he did not say to me, right, here's the rule book. We're going to study that for a few weeks. Then we're going to look at spatial awareness. Then we're going to look at the ballistics of balls. Then we're going to look at the history of the Football League. And finally, when you've done all those things, you might be allowed to play football. What he did was take me out in the garden and have a kick around. And that's like the flowers in the garden, isn't it? That having fun with someone and sharing that pleasure with someone is all the motivation that you need, and it really grounds it in your mind. So it's that thing of encouraging parents and teachers to show and share pleasure, I think, is crucial.
Yeah, absolutely. Alfredo, what are your thoughts on inspiring future children of the Andes?
Bueno, para esta parte yo voy a pedir auxilio. Antes de mi intervención, yo quiero invitar a dos jóvenes que desde muy pequeñitas siempre han sido lectoras de bibliotecas rurales y son voluntarias de bibliotecas rurales. Entonces, he pedido a Mara y a Selma que por favor den un pequeño testimonio en esta parte de que sería para ellas la inspiración para los libros, los lectores y escritores.
Buenas tardes, yo soy Mara, soy voluntaria en la red desde siempre, porque mis papás y mi hermano también son voluntarios. Desde antes de nacer ya iba con mi mamá a las comunidades, así que he crecido con esas caminatas y con nuestros libros. A mí me gustan los libros que puedo tocar, los libros en físico. Un libro con páginas inspira para escribir más páginas. Y pueden inspirar todavía más los libros que uno puede leer sin tener que consultar el diccionario, ni interrumpir para preguntar a alguien sus significados. Si demostramos el valor de los libros, esa puede ser una gran inspiración. Y ojalá que los libros del futuro cohesionen a las familias con lo que cuentan y con lo que dicen, de manera que uno pueda comprender a las otras generaciones y aprender de ellas. Así podríamos estar más juntos en el futuro.
Hola, buenas tardes. Yo nací y crecí en el campo y aprendí a leer con los libros de la red, porque mi papá es bibliotecario rural y después yo también he sido bibliotecaria. Como de 5 o 6 años de edad, yo leía los cuentos de nuestros libros. Me gustó mucho saber que lo que me contaba mi abuelita lo podía encontrar en un libro. Ser parte de la red me ha ayudado en mi formación. Puedo verlo ahora que soy estudiante en la universidad. Soy parte de esta comunidad y valoro muchísimo el respeto hacia los otros. Es una experiencia única el estar al servicio de los demás y aprender con todos. Es muy importante la presencia y la inspiración de las bibliotecas rurales en mi vida para no perder lo que he ganado, nuestra cultura, nuestros saberes. Quiero prepararme y escribir lo que he vivido.
Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, chicas.
Well done, Selma and Mara. Thank you.
Sí, muchas gracias. Yo quiero, como respuesta casi a esta pregunta, quiero terminar con el cuento del niño que no quería leer y que le preguntó a su abuelo por qué era importante hacerlo. Pues tomaron el camino hacia el campo, tomados de la mano, se sentaron bajo un árbol. El abuelo abrazó a su nieto delante de él y puso el espejo frente a su rostro. Los libros son como espejos, le dijo. En ellos puedes ver el reflejo de tu mirada, puedes ver a tu abuelo junto a ti, puedes sentir nuestro abrazo, puedes ver el camino que hemos transitado y puedes ver los campos donde estamos. Tú puedes seguir mirando de frente, le dijo el abuelo, mientras te miras en el espejo. Además, alguien dijo alguna vez que la escritura no es la sombra de la voz, sino la huella de sus pasos. Yo puedo decirte que la escritura es, además, el resplandor de lo que piensas, el destello de lo que sientes, el eco de tu caminar y la realización de todo lo que sueñas. Ojalá que los libros los lectores y los escritores de las historias del futuro puedan tomar en cuenta esa unidad, ese sentido de este cuento del abuelo.
Thank you, Alfredo. Time is moving on. Dan, have we got any questions so that the audience want answered?
Yeah, we have got some questions that have come in. One from Pip in York. She's been out to visit Alfredo 20 years ago and saw all the work of the rural libraries. Question to Alfredo, as you're on the verge of celebrating the 50th year of the rural libraries, how would you summarize the impact that the reading has had on the lives of those in the Andes? And how do you think this might have been different had there been no scheme created?
Pues hace ya varios años, en una asamblea, en una reunión muy grande con bibliotecarios, con lectores, con coordinadores, lancé esa pregunta. ¿Cuál sería el resultado más grande de nuestra presencia como lectores, como bibliotecarios rurales? Y los comuneros, los campesinos dijeron, hemos perdido el achichín. El achichín es una palabra que quiere decir vergüenza, miedo, mucho temor. Cuando uno tiene mucho miedo dice, achichín, tengo miedo, ¿no? Hemos perdido el achichín. El leer nos llevó a estar orgullosos de nosotros mismos, a celebrar nuestra mirada y nuestra forma de ser, a celebrar nuestra dignidad y nuestra capacidad para ser ciudadanos en el buen sentido, a ser campesinos honorables y a exigir respeto por nuestras tradiciones. Eso fue hace muchos años y ha permanecido, pero es cierto también que en los últimos años nos ha golpeado mucho la presencia de las tecnologías modernas y su uso indiscriminado, pero también es cierto que se fortalecen nuevas formas de leer en comunidad, de leer en grupo, de comprobar el efecto real de la lectura en las familias, en las personas, en las comunidades. Entonces, si tuviera que resumir, yo diría que el mayor logro es permanecer a pesar de los pesares, porque somos una organización campesina que no depende del Estado, que no depende de una iglesia, que no depende de un partido, completamente autónomos, completamente independientes y muy orgullosos del camino que seguimos construyendo.
Thank you.
Great.
Gracias.
There's another question here, Alfredo, from Kathy. She says her grandchildren really love series of books with heroes and superheroes. I hope that's got Broccoli Boy in it, Kathy. Now, do writers in Peru produce such series? What do children read in Peru?
Ay. Lastimosamente no hay. Y si la hay, no alcanzan a llegar a las comunidades. O si la hay, no han surgido todavía las comunidades. Voy a contar dos cosas rapidito. Una es que teníamos un bibliotecario rural que era un niño en ese tiempo de 10 años, un niño que había nacido sin manos y sin piernas, y él era el bibliotecario. la comunidad había elegido a él como bibliotecario. Y un día he llegado a visitarlo y le pregunté, en medio de todo, ¿y quién es tu personaje favorito? Y él me dijo, el hombre araña. Me impresionó mucho porque las limitaciones que él tenía físicamente no le llevaban a sentirse limitado en sus aspiraciones. Pero eso es un caso exclusivo, cuando alguien puede acceder a otras maneras de información, a otras formas. Pero también es cierto que los personajes clásicos de la invasión que tenemos a través de la televisión o del cine no han calado como héroes en el campo para nosotros. Entonces, para nosotros, en el campo, los niños, un héroe, por ejemplo, es el cuy cuando engaña al zorro que quiere comérselo, o el conejo que no se deja atrapar. Es un héroe. Es un héroe en la acción concreta y en el relato concreto. O las montañas son héroes, los apus, las lagunas son héroes. El agua que defiende la comunidad es un héroe, por ejemplo, ¿no? Lo que nos unifica. Pero no hay esos héroes como normalmente se tienen con la literatura. Sí.
Okay, thanks for that. Also got a question from Debbie for Frank. Is there a book from British literature that you would like to recommend to the rural libraries in Peru?
All of my books, they're just all brilliant. I mean, books don't have barriers, I think. I wouldn't particularly feel empowered to recommend a particular book, but I will say this, that, you know, the books that made me, that really, really spoke to me, were the Moomin books by Tove Jansson. I've still got my copies. These books, right? They really, really spoke to me growing up. And I felt that she was writing just for me. I'm saying she, I didn't know whether she was male or female because her name is so strange. I thought she might be one of the creatures from her books. They're set in Finland. I didn't know Finland was a country. I thought it was like Narnia. I thought she'd invented it. And Tove Jansson was a very small, upper middle class, bohemian lesbian. And I thought she was writing straight to me, who was like a working class boy on a housing estate in Liverpool. There are no barriers. You know, that's the really great thing about children's literature, I think, that it just doesn't recognize those barriers at all. You know, and the fairy stories that travel around the world they take on the flavor of the place. Cinderella began in China, but everybody feels Cinderella belongs to them. Russian people think Winnie the Pooh is Russian, and we think he's quintessentially English. You know, the wonderful thing about children's literature, Spider-Man, Spider-Man can speak to a boy in Peru, and yet he comes from a very particular time and place in America, about a very, very specific moment in American history, but it becomes universal. Same with Pinocchio. You know, Pinocchio is like a completely specific political statement about political times in Italy. Who the hell remembers that? You know, that's irrelevant. Really great stories belong to everybody. So definitely you should read mine.
Brilliant. A question for both Frank and Alfredo. As you're both from areas that aren't the sort of capital cities of your countries, could you just speak about how Reading for Children can give them a sense of sort of pride in their local identity, and how that relates to giving a sense of humanity as a whole?
Gracias. En el Perú hay escritores fantásticos, fabulosos, realmente. Pero es muy difícil que se pueda acceder a esta especie de lenguaje estándar de los escritores, muchas veces capitalinos, muchas veces de la capital, cuando no le hemos perdido el miedo a la lectura. En el caso nuestro, los libros siempre estuvieron negados al campo. Era un joven, un niño que leía, era un joven peligroso en el campo. El poder establecido hasta finales de los años 60, era un peligro que en una comunidad hubiera libros. Eso era un bien prohibido prácticamente. Pero no solamente era un bien prohibido, era un bien ajeno. Lo que decía era ajeno, el dueño de ese libro era ajeno, el autor de ese libro no pertenecía a la comunidad. De manera que un paso importante para nosotros ha sido ver cómo podemos no solamente leer, sino producir nuestros propios libros. Desde ese paso, nosotros podemos acceder a otras literaturas y comprender otras formas de decir el mundo, otras formas de comprender el mundo, otras formas de relacionarse con él. Entonces ese paso es importante para comprender nuestro rol, nuestra ubicación en un país que muchas veces nos niega, que niega a sus hijos, que no los reconoce o que los ignora por completo.
Okay, Frank?
I mean, it's always, I think I've specifically written a lot of my books to be in Liverpool and specifically in Bootle, which is like never mentioned in literature. And I did that specifically because I know it's an absolute buzz if you open a book and your place is in that book. And I've done it in other places. But I would also say we can project, you know, children, like a limbless child can imagine himself as Spider-Man. And I would often be able to project, you know, myself into Narnia or wherever these stories were happening. So it's not, I think it's a kind of two-way street. I mean, it's a wonderful thing to read in a school in Liverpool and name a street and see the kids go, I live in that street, you know? And I had an amazing experience this summer that I wrote a book set in a kind of very quiet part of southwest Scotland. And I went there, I went to the beach. I mean, it's just somewhere I like. And there was somebody on the beach talking to me and just came up and was chatting to me and said, it's lovely here. Yeah, he said, it's in a book, you know. And he started to describe my book, which was fantastic. Yeah, but I think we can project ourselves into, I think one thing that I would like to point out is that when I was growing up, there was a lot of books in translation available to us. The British book industry offered a lot of, like, so this was originally published in Swedish, and there was a lot of German books, I mean, the detectives, and children's literature speaks a universal language, you know, whether it's the Brothers Grimm, whether it's fairy tales, whether it's the Arabian Nights, whether it's magical stories from South America or folk tales from North America. These are a universal currency, but we see less and less, or fewer and fewer, books in translation now. I got a shock. I went to a place in Germany, in Munich, where there's a special library in honor of a German writer. And it's a library of books of children's books in translation. I was thinking, if you did that in Britain now, it would be a very small number, and there would be very few current ones. There'd be a lot of Brothers Grimm, there'd be a lot of Arabian Nights, but I wouldn't know what was going on in Spanish children's writing, or even German children's writing, although Germans publish a lot of books in translation still. So I feel that's a loss. I don't quite know how that's happened or why, but it's a huge, huge loss, I think.
This is fascinating, this conversation, but I'm very sad to say that we've come to the end of our hour. We could go on for ages. Perhaps we'll have another one sometime. So I'm very sorry that we haven't got through to some of the questions. I can see some interesting questions in Spanish there. But we have to finish. But just as a promotion for our charity, if you've been inspired by this conversation and by the work of the Bibliotecas Rurales, and you want to help us, please do so. But how can you do that? Well, you can sign up to the mailing list and always share things on social media. It's really important for us to get, I think, this message of what people are doing in the Andes, what the community are doing in the Andes to a wider audience. Of course, donations are always welcome, and it is very difficult in this time of COVID to have some of our regular events. And monthly donations are even better because we can help plan the work a little bit. And in future, we love having concerts, film shows, bake sales, World Book Day events, all those kind of things we raise money through. But right now, for the our lockdown project, which we've discussed with Alfredo and his team, is that we are trying to raise money for family library boxes, which can be distributed to disadvantaged families that may not have, certainly no phone link, no electricity, certainly no technology. And there's a lot of families, the school is closed in Peru, and we know Peru has been hit extremely hard by this virus. And so we have suggested this project, and we are part of the Big Give Christmas campaign, which runs from the 1st of December to the 8th of December, where we will be doing fundraising online, and hopefully we would have got match funded from a sponsor. So we would really like you to help us spread the word about that, and that would be a really good way to help us support the communities who aren't even, because the librarians can't function at the moment with the exchange of books due to restrictions in Peru, and the restrictions are quite severe in Peru as well at the moment. So we've come to an end. I'd really like to thank Frank and Alfredo and Mara and Zelma for your contributions. A huge thank you to Sandra and James, who've been doing the translation, and it's been fantastic. Thank you to all the trustees and the people behind the scene working the technology, which is always very tricky. And thank you very much. We can see 62 of you have attended this webinar. Thanks again, and buenas tardes or buenas noches.
Estén muy bien.
Okay. Muchísimas gracias.
Gracias a todos. Suerte.
Muchas gracias.